A very good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to the reality shift. So, I've decided before posting content with other beings, I decided to just give a somewhat psychoanalysis and in depth into self kind of evaluation, reflection, comprehension, and growing from such an experience. So, this particular episode is centered around identity crisis and language insecurity. And I really felt like I wasn't able to express self in this regard, and this is a wonderful platform for me to get my vantage and my perspective out into the masses. So, I'd like to start off with how I was raised. I was born and raised in Westville, and I was taught only to speak English. I wasn't surrounded I didn't have many cultural and heritage experiences. My mother and father chose to raise my brother and myself speaking English. And I think for the longest time, growing up, especially in high school, which I'm still going to get to now, persons didn't know that I couldn't speak isiZulu. And I'm Xhosa, by the way, anyway. But, when we're in Tegwini, you know the vibes. And I'm sure some of them will be pretty surprised when listening to this or watching this video. Because I remember I felt as if I had like a loss of identity, or I wasn't able to accept myself, so I tried to be something else, in a way, a different way of being that wasn't complementary to the way that I was. And I'll expand upon that as I go on. I remember the transition from grade 7 to high school. And that was the first time I came into contact with racial divides existing in an environment. Because I never grew up seeing color per se, but only to experience love and learn to seek love and turn away from a lack of love. And I remember that transition into high school, and I went into high school, and there was these boxes and mental constructs and ways of being. Like at Westville Boys in 2009, I remember I didn't know where I fitted in. I suppose that's general, high school struggles, just trying to come out in and find yourself. But I found myself throughout my high school career, I wasn't able to come to terms with my identity, and I eroded my sense of self and my complete beauty of myself. At the expense of, trying to please others in a way, and trying to identify instead of being uniquely and wholesomely myself. And then from there, that's when growth happens. And there's so many things that come to mind with these kinds of experiences. And I'm sure I actually wanted to have my brother on the show, and he was like, "Oh no, I'm not going to come on the show. I'm not going to come on the show." He was like, "Oh no, I'm going to come. I'm going to come on the show, and we're going to talk in the morning and have a conversation." And then he just bailed. But we've both experienced this, and for him, it's. I think it's a lot worse because he flat out can't speak isiZulu. He can't at all. And being an African and a black young man, there's assumptions with that, right? Um, um, but yeah, I just wanted to talk about my experience. I remember, when the family business wasn't going so well, and the support structure and the comforts that were afforded to me were completely kind of taken underneath. The carpet was pulled from underneath our feet. I remember the first time I took a taxi. I was so petrified. And I think when it comes to energy, people in general, we all feel energy. Everything is energy. The only thing that is pure and that exists is energy. And could feel that the energy of this young man is completely imbalanced. And I remember it was because I realized that I couldn't interact in this specific environment because I didn't have this cultural part of self and my identity on a physical level, my ancestors, etc., that was taken away from me because of colonial systems that have been put in place to, kind of detach persons from their culture and their heritage so that they can, be controlled, etc. There's a whole story about, colonial structures and all these kinds of things, or whatever it is. But I hope I'm explaining myself as best as I can. And it was petrifying. And yeah, that was just my experience. And there was a lot of very negative energy because I'd come with an uncomfortable way of being because I wasn't uncomfortable in this particular environment. So that was just basically an experience that I wanted to express. Moving on to acceptance. And the whole time until now, until very recently, I wasn't able to accept self and acknowledge and love self for the way I was. Because acceptance is the first thing, the first step to moving forward and to growth long term. And when I accepted myself and allowed myself to be unequivocally and completely and holistically just myself, no filter, just being as is, was the first step for me to leveling up into a higher consciousness and to transitioning to allowing myself to be open to learning isiZulu, because there was a lot of resistance because there wasn't acceptance. There wasn't acceptance here cognitively. And that was when I was able to learn isiZulu. Um, and that's basically what it is, through acceptance. Um, and I really felt throughout my journey that the systems that exist at the moment do not complement the native languages. Every single system, it always takes a back burner. And as a result, it becomes the collective consciousness thought, or that one has to speak English in order to become more successful, more informed, be in better spaces, etc., etc. And that's how the systems exist at the moment, the educational systems. How it's to this day, children that speak isiZulu, Xhosa, or Swati, or Tswana, they are taught in English. But yet, in certain institutions, for example, my UNISA, persons are allowed to choose whether they want to learn or write the exams in English and Afrikaans, because they understand that to empower the people, you can teach them information in their native, and that's how they become empowered. And you can teach them English through the medium of their native language, and that's how they become empowered. Right? This is why we see in our education system so many persons failing and all these other things, because at the root, number one, that is the first thing. Okay? And then there's a whole lot of other issues as well. And I wanted to move forward and implore, or move on rather, and to say that I want to implore parents, African parents, right? In fact, I want to implore any parents, ethnic parents with living in South Africa, to teach your children the predominant language or languages of that land, especially for African children as well, because the connection I wasn't able to identify. I wasn't able to feel holistically as a black man and as a human being, because of that of which was taken away from me by systematic propaganda, etc., etc. I also wanted to speak to Caucasian parents and persons and kids and all the ethnic groups to take this time to understand that if you're living in South Africa, you must understand that the number one spoken language in South Africa is Zulu, followed by Xhosa, then Tswana, and English is the only fourth language. So to connect and to become more human, you need to step out of your comfort zone and make sure that you learn the language or languages of the land. That is how we become more human. And then you will start to understand and relate and connect to your fellow man. Right? It's very important to take that step. And I really want to challenge persons to take that step and to think about it, right? And to burst the bubble, because change only comes with self, the individual, right? Making that change a priority. If you go on holiday to France or Italy, what do? You learn French phrases or Italian phrases, right? Because why? In that native country, that's their native language, right? And you want to connect with the people there. Exactly the same thing. So you cannot at this day and age exist in an environment and not be able to at least understand one of the majority spoken languages in South Africa. And I want to challenge you, please, and make this a challenge to yourself and to incorporate it into your way of being and try and prioritize your growth in this regard. And love always recognizes love, right? The more love you put out, becoming more human, and that's how we connect, that's how we grow, that's how we become more in service. And that's how we attract more blessings into our lives. Okay? Yeah. Okay, that's just pretty much what I had written down and basically what I wanted to speak about today. Yeah. And please do subscribe to The Reality Shift on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and please follow my Instagram handle at Litzwe Mbotho on Facebook, Instagram, and I've got a couple of interviews lined up that I'm very excited about. I'm doing a bit more on mental health awareness. Then I've got some phenomenal movers and shakers coming in to do an interview with me. And please stay tuned, show your love and support, and let's create our reality and shift our perspective. Peace out.